Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Tripp Advisor, Tabletop Tuesday edition with me, your host, Jason Tripp. Continuing on in our little three-part review tutorial series of the Azul family of games. Last week, if you missed it, I reviewed the original Azul game. Very popular abstract strategy game, 2 to 4 players. If you haven't checked out that video already, you can do so on the channel. This week, however, moving on to the second of 3 games in the Azul family. This one also designed by Michael Kiesling and called the Stained Glass of Sintra. Similar in a lot of ways in the mechanics to the first game, with a different theme, as the title suggests. Not constructing tiles in this one, but constructing stained glass windows. And so why don't you pull up a chair, join me at the table. I'll walk through how the game works, and we'll come back up and I'll give you my sort of final thoughts on the game, my report card, and my comparison between what I think about this one as it compares to the original Azul. So pull up a chair as we dive into Azul, the Stained Glass of Sintra. Okay, here's the setup for Azul Stained Glass of Sintra with all the components out of the box. I'm setting up for a 2-player game today, and as I did last week, I'll just walk through one round of play to give you an idea of the flow and the basic mechanics of the game. Some similarities and crossover with the original, and some things are unique to this game. The similarities, again, we're setting up with these factories here. So the game comes with 9 of these circular factory tiles. If you're playing a 4-player game, you'll use all 9 of them. If you're playing a 3-player game, you'll need 7. Today, we're simulating, again, a 2-player game, so we'll only need 5 of those. And I've already randomly drawn tiles out of the bag. Again, this comes with a nice Azul bag. You put all of these colorful tiles. Again, because it's a stained glass theme, these ones are a bit, I don't know if you can see it, they're a bit translucent. Simulating pieces of stained glass. So you'll randomly set out 4 of those on each of the factory tiles. Once again, we have a starting player token at the beginning of the game that starts in the middle, and whoever's the first player to grab from the broken pieces in the middle will assume starting player for the subsequent round. The player boards are a little different in the Stained Glass of Sintra. A little bit more involved in the setup. You'll give each player by color one of these bottom pieces here, double-sided. One side will say side A and the other side will say side B. Different scoring, a couple different variants. We'll just talk about the side A and use that today, but I will mention briefly at the end of the walkthrough how side B is a little bit different. And then each player, color coordinated, will have 8 of these sort of panels, these stained glass panels. They're double-sided as well. And what you're going to want to do is just take the appropriate color, 8 of them, shuffle them up, and randomly play them. It doesn't matter which side is which at the start of the game. The only exception being is one of the 8 tiles. Most of them have the colors that match the 5 color tiles in the game: yellow, white, blue, pink, and orange. But there is one tile in particular, and I should say that this tile here, there's 4 yellow and 1 blue. But up at the top, it actually gives you sort of a heads up. It gives you a preview of what's coming on the other side. And on this one, there's 2 dark shaded gray. 2 dark shaded gray tiles. That one, those are wild cards, wild tokens, and you want to always keep that face down. So that's the only thing to worry about when you're setting up, is be mindful that that one is face down. Otherwise, it's totally random, the setup. Each player has the same tiles. Shuffle them, setup should look like this. Also unique to this Azul game in the family, each player will have one of these pawn tokens. The glazier is the specific name to the theme of the game, and so they'll be the ones who will be constructing various panels of stained glass, and they'll be moving sort of back and forth throughout the game depending on which panel they are working. They start at the top left at the beginning of the game, and I'll show how they interact and move in a few minutes. Also unique to this game is this player board here in the top right. Zoom in a little bit so you can see a close-up of the player board. In this game, you'll have 2 little tokens. One will start here at 0. So you've got a score track. You'll be working your way around the board, scoring each round. And the other tokens will go here. Here's where you'll accumulate some negative points, and I'll explain that shortly. The game goes for 6 rounds, unlike the original Azul game where we're not sure how many rounds the game will go. This is a set 6 rounds. So every time you play, there'll be 6 rounds. And at the beginning of the game, you're going to draw one of each of the 5 colors in the game, and you're randomly going to put them from rounds 2 through 6 here. That will ascertain, will let you know which particular colors are a wild color for that particular round. And then, as I've done here, you just reach in the bag and you just grab a random color for round 1. So I drew a blue. So in the first round we're simulating, any blue tiles are deemed wild. And I'll talk about what that means. They're the bonus, so there's some extra scoring attached to those particular colors. Also unique to this second Stained Glass of Sintra Azul game is this little stained glass tower. Has some aesthetic value, but it also has a functional purpose. After every round, as you're taking the tiles off your player boards rather than just storing them in the box, you just simply put them in here. And then when you run out of tiles in the bag, you can simply dump all the tiles in there back in the bag. So it's aesthetically pleasing, but it also serves a practical purpose in the game. And so that's the setup for Azul Stained Glass of Sintra. Let's just talk a little bit about the game flow and the mechanics. As I did last week, I'm just going to simulate one round of the game. This is round 1, and we'll just say randomly by closing hands and choosing pawns that the blue player is the starting player. And as I mentioned, because there is a blue color here on round 1, that means that any blue tokens completed this round give you a bonus score. For example, if this player here was able to acquire 1 blue and 4 yellow, when you're able to acquire the amount to complete an entire column, an entire stained glass column, what happens is you immediately take one of those tiles, you put them down here as a placeholder at the bottom. So just for the sake of example, let's say that during the course of this round, and I will simulate the round first, but I want to just show this visually. Let's say this player, throughout the course of the round, is able to accumulate the corresponding colors. He's now completed, he or she has completed this column, the left-hand most column here. They would simply take a color of their choice, doesn't matter, and they would simply put it down here. You see the symbol here means, that's a reminder, now you flip that over. So you discard the other 4. You'd flip that over. But because blue is the color that is the bonus color, you would get a point scored right now for having a blue completed as part of that panel. So on the score track, you would simply bump your token up 1. And then you would flip this tile over. That is now in play. If later on during the course of the game, this particular tile, this one that was flipped, was completed, same idea. You take one of the tile from the completed ones, from remembering these 2 are wild here. You place it here as well. And at that point, you would simply remove that from play. Now you're only working on 7 panels for the remainder of the game. And so as the game progresses, you're going to certainly want to be completing as many columns as possible, filling up your bottom, because the majority of the scoring comes at the end of the game based on how many of these you successfully filled up throughout the course of the game. So let's put these back in the factories in the appropriate spots. And let's simulate one round of the game. Again, these tokens, it's important that they start on the leftmost side, because on each player's turn, you have 2 options. More often than not, you're going to be grabbing, as in the other Azul games, you're going to be grabbing all of one color from one of the factories, and you're going to be placing it on one of your columns. All of the colors you choose have to go in the same column. If you take more colors than there are room for on any of your columns, then that's where the negative scoring comes into play. And of the 3 Azul games, this is the one that is potentially the most punishing. You can really rack up some negative points if you're not careful, or if the other players around the table are strategically trying to block you. And so you want to be mindful of not taking more of the color than you can fit on your board. So how does it work? Well, when your glazier's on the leftmost side, the rule is you can always build either directly below where your token is, or any stained glass column to the right. So, for example, this is the starting player. I see there's 3 orange up for grab in one factory. That's the only triple in play. So perhaps player 1 here, the blue player, wants to snag those. And then he has 3 options because there's 3 panels that have orange. I can put them in this column here. I can put 3 of the 5 in this column here, or I can put 3 there. Well, perhaps this player thinks, well, maybe I can complete that one this round. So let's put all 3 there. If he does that, the glazier moves directly over wherever you are currently working. Now the downside to putting these 3 orange here means the glazier is now limited. On the next turn, I can only either build on this row or this column or this column. If I don't like those options, on the next blue player's turn, rather than grabbing tiles from a factory and placing them on those limited options, you can choose to reset your glazier, moving it back over to the leftmost position, giving you a full number of options for the next round. Of course, the downside is you've taken a turn to do that, while the other players at the table are potentially collecting more tiles. So with that in mind, maybe this player rethinks that. I don't want to go that far to the right on my first turn. And so maybe they just decide to put 3 out of the 4 orange there. And the reality is, again, looking at the bonus, round 3 is the round where you want to complete a lot of orange. So maybe they'll just leave that there for a couple rounds. Or maybe they'll be able to complete that this round. And so I move my glazier over to the column 4. That is the blue player's turn. Remember, all colors, the rule is all colors that are left on the factory, you're only grabbing all of one color. Any remaining tiles get slid into the middle as they accumulate. The first person, now that becomes another option where you can take from. So the red player could take this single white if they wanted. If they do that, they would also grab the starting player token. But the downside, like in the first game of Azul, if you take the starting player token, the upside is you go first next round. The downside is it costs you a negative point. So you would move down the negative score track there, losing points at the end of the game. You don't lose those points immediately, I should say. They accumulate, and the further you go down, the faster it multiplies. -1, -2, 4, 5, 8, 10, 12, 15, and 18 is the maximum you can score. You just score that at the end of the game. You don't score that each time you move down. So now we go to the red player's turn, and she looks at the options, and she sees, well, I've got a lot of yellow right here where I am. Yellow's going to be the bonus round next round. So perhaps we'll take these 2 yellow, sliding these 2 blue into the middle, adding these 2 yellow here, and leaving our glazier exactly where it is, leaving all the options for the next turn. Now back to the blue player. Blue player looks at the options, hums and haws, and says, well, I've got only a pink and an orange here, a lot of white upcoming here. Perhaps this player wants to take 2 yellow. Takes those 2 yellow again, slides these 2 into the middle. Now it's accumulating. No yellow there. The only yellow option is down here. So in this case, the glazier would slide down to that position there, adding those 2 tiles in place. Back to the red player's turn, who's in a good position, sees a number of options, sees there's 2 more yellow. Could add those 2 yellow there. Although now there's 3 blue and 2 white in the middle. This is an opportunity, a time where the red player really wants to think, what do I want more? Do I want to finish those 2 yellow in preparation for next round and then be able to finish that and get 4 bonus points when we're in round 2 where yellow is worth extra points? Could do that. The downside to that, however, is where the strategy comes into play. Now I'm pushing all of these into the middle. I'm giving my opponent potentially 4 blue. And those 4 blue can be added right here. Not only can the 4 blue be added, but there's white up for grabs. And if the blue player finishes this column in this round, they will get 4 points. And so this is a bit of a dilemma for the red player. And so the red player, after looking at the options, says, well, maybe I'll just bite the bullet. I'll take the 3 blue, take starting player. The starting player now comes into possession of the red player. Because the red player is starting player, the red will lose 1 point at the end of the game. Small price to pay, however. And we'll put those 3 blue here, completing 3 out of 5, sliding the glazier down to that position. Now there's no consequences now for going in the middle after the starting player token has been taken. We're back to the blue player now. Blue player was really hoping to get those 4 blue. Here are the options. Not much orange available, not much blue available. Opportunity to take a white or to reset. And this is the time where blue says, you know what, I'm just going to reset. So moves the glazier back all the way to the left. And then that would be the turn. When you reset your glazier, you don't get to draw any tiles from the factories. That is simply your turn. Now it goes back to the red player again. Red player sees, unfortunately, there's only 1 blue left, so they can't quite complete that panel. There is, however, a couple of yellow available, a couple of white. And so maybe the red player says, I'm not going to reset just yet. I'm going to take these 2 yellow, pushing these 2 into the middle, putting the 2 yellow here on panel number 7, moving, again, the glazier on top of that. And now we're getting close to the end of the round now. Blue's options are limited here, but they've got a lot of options now on their board, having reset. Now the dilemma is, do they go for volume? Do they go for the 3 white and push their glazier over there? Or do they just try and keep this at the leftmost portion? Tough call, tough call. So many options in this game. Let's say the blue player decides, you know, those 3 are too good to pass up. The one and only spot on the board with white is here. Again, move the glazier over to that position. Back to the red player's turn. Red player decides, what do I want to do? The blue is no good. There's no place to the right to put the blue. There are a couple of pink. Do they want to reset now? Or do they want to wait? And I think they're going to grab this 2 pink while the getting's good. Sliding those now into the middle. Those 2 pink. The only option would be to put them there. Back over to the blue player here with limited options, just singles. And maybe they just want to, you know, work on another white at this point, staying where they are in the same position, adding a white. Obviously the red player at this point, red player's options are very limited. Red only has the option of yellow or pink. There's no yellow or pink there. It would be foolish to take that just to lose a point. And so obviously it's time for the red player to reset the glazier. Blue player sees blue, sees orange, decides it's going to be time to, well, maybe they want to take an orange. You know, the reality is they put that there. That only leaves 2 orange next round. Maybe they can get 2 next round. And then, again, thinking, always looking ahead to what's coming next, seeing I got 2 yellow waiting in the wings here for 2 bonus points next round. So they'll add the 1 there. And then that leaves a blue for the red player. And the nice thing with the red player is they can slot that blue right there, keeping their glazier on the leftmost side. The downside of not resetting is now going into the next round. Blue starts in a limited position here. Not always into the strategy when to reset your glazier to the farmost left, keeping an eye on what other players are doing. This one's a little more strategically involved, but that's simply 1 round of the game. And so after the round, you would leave all the tiles on the panels that aren't finished. Again, if they're finished, remember you move them to the bottom and you would flip over your panels. So for instance, if this was done, again, you would flip it over and you would leave a tile there at the end. So that's the end of 1 round. So at the end of the round, you'll remove this bonus tile. Nobody was able to score any bonuses for finishing any tiles in the first round. Any completed tiles, again, would go in the tower. Now you'll simply reset. You'll set up again. You'll grab 4 tiles out of the bag for each factory. Starting player would go first, and you continue the game in that fashion, scoring points as you get bonus points when you finish panels in the round that corresponds with the bonus, 1 at a 1-to-1 ratio. I do want to now fast forward to the end of the game, so I'm just going to set up a simulated end game scenario, filling a few of these at the bottom, and just walk through the end game scoring after round 6. So you'll play 6 rounds in this fashion. scoring and keeping negative score as needed, but the majority of the scoring does happen at the end of the game. So we'll fast forward to that, and I'll simulate some endgame scoring now. Okay, before I talk about the endgame scoring, there is another component of scoring I failed to mention earlier. I just want to zoom in on the player board to make this clear. Again, as you complete a panel, so let's say this is panel number 1 and I've completed it, I'm going to be putting a tile on that spot. At the bottom of each panel, there is a series of numbers, 1 through 4. The leftmost is 4, 3, sort of going down to 1, 1, and 2 here on the far right. You will be scoring those points immediately, and you see these arrows here pointing to the right. If this is the first one I completed in the course of the game, I would simply score 4 points immediately. Again, this is the blue team. Let's say the first one I completed was over here in this 2 spot. Now I would have got 2 points only for this one. And then let's say the second one I scored during the course of the game was on the left here. You would not only score 4, but you would rescore any completed tiles moving to the right. And so that plays into this strategy. You'll get more points immediately if you start finishing the ones on the leftmost side. But if you can invest in finishing these ones on the right, they will score repeatedly throughout the course of the game because you will rescore those as you move from left to right every time you complete a tile on the left side of the player board. So again, for example, if this is the first one completed, it would just simply be 2 points. If this was the second one completed, it would be worth 6 points because I would get 4 for this spot, and then moving to the right, I would score an additional 2 once again for all completed tiles. If both are completed, you don't score them twice, you simply score them once as you move left to right. And so again, that's a good chunk of the scoring before you get to the end game. I've already talked about the bonus scoring, but as you're completing panels, you will be scoring those points in that fashion. Now let's get to the end game simulation. So this is a possible end game scenario. Again, you're going to be removing these columns as you complete both sides. So at the end of the game, any column that has 2 tiles on it, that tile or that panel should have been removed from play, limiting your options as you reach the conclusion of the game. So in this case, you can see each team, the 2 players, each player has 3 panels left on their player board. They successfully completed 5, which is quite good. Now I just want to talk about the end game scoring. And this, again, these have 2 sides. We're playing the side A. So I want to talk about the side A scoring. Then I'll flip it over and I'll briefly talk about side B, another variant. You have 2 sort of end game scoring variants you're working toward. Just going to raise one of these bottom parts to get a closer look at the scoring for the blue team here. And note some of the intricate detail and design here. You see these little ornaments, there's 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, and every second sort of column there's an ornament. How the scoring works for the A side of the player board is you score based on how well you surrounded those ornaments. So 1, 2, 3, 4 ornaments. If you totally surround it, meaning you've successfully stained glassed in all of those particular panes. In this case here, I have 4 tiles surrounding this ornament. Anytime you do that, that's worth 10 points. So I would get 10 points for totally surrounding this ornament, and additional 10 points here for totally surrounding that ornament there. This particular ornament, 3 out of the 4 spots are surrounded, and so in that case you would score 6 points. And in this case I have 2 of the 4 completed. In that case I would score 3. If, for instance, I was only able to complete 1 out of the 4, that's worth 0 points. So you want to try and at least get 2 out of 4, but if you can totally surround them, that's where you're getting the most points. So for a total, this board would be 10, 20, 26, and another 3, a total of 29 points added to the points that were accumulated the course of the game on laying tiles and scoring points as I outlined here, as well as any bonus points. Don't forget you're going to subtract any negative points you've accumulated throughout the course of the game, and whoever has the highest score at the end of the 6 rounds after the final game scoring will win the game. And that's how you play this Azul Stained Glass of Sintra Why don't you pull up a chair? We'll go back up top now. I'll give some final thoughts, my report card, and do a little bit of comparison between this game and the original Azul I reviewed last week. All right, that's Azul, Stained Glass of Sintra, the second of the 3 games in the Azul family. Give some final thoughts now and the report card for the game. Starting off with the theme. I mentioned in my review last week for the first Azul, theme is really irrelevant in all of these games. I mean, they are abstract strategy games. I don't buy these games looking for a deep, immersive theme. That being said, of the 3, I think this one, the theme, is the best of the bunch. I mean, that ties into the aesthetics of the game as well. The look of the game enhanced by the theme, the stained glass windows. I mean, I've always been enamored and fascinated by stained glass windows in churches and religious settings since my childhood. And so the theme it's appealing to me. Again, it's not the richest, most immersive theme, but it is a better theme than the first game, certainly. So I'll give the theme for this game a B. As far as the aesthetics of the game, it's kind of a mixed bag for me. I really enjoy the player boards, the panels, high quality cardboard. Colors are great. I really like how they included the tower in this game, and we'll see that again next week in the third and final Azul game. Not just the aesthetic quality, but the practical value of a place to store the tiles when they're coming off the boards. It gives it that sort of 3D effect on the table. To be honest, the tiles, I understand the reason they have to be sort of translucent, semi-transparent, because it's stained glass windows. But I can't stop thinking they look like Hall's cough drops on the table. They don't feel as nice in the hand. They don't have as nice a look as the tiles in the first game or in the third game, for that matter, as we'll see. So it's kind of a mixed bag. I mean, the colors do pop off the table. There's that 3D value. The quality of the components is fine. I'll give the aesthetics a B. Replayability. Again, all 3 games in this family, quite replayable. They hit the table quite frequently in our family. This one maybe not quite as much as the first one. The first one's a little easier to set up, get on the table, get off the table. This one's a little more involved, a little longer gameplay. But that being said, again, because of the variability, each time you play, it'll be a new, different, unique game, and that adds to the replayability. So again, I'll give it a solid score of a B. The gameplay and the game flow. As you probably saw, if you saw last week's video, if you played the original Azul compared to this one is quite a bit more involved. Not a heavy game by any stretch, but there's more moving parts and pieces. And so the gameplay and flow, depending on the people around the table, how familiar they are with the game, it can drag a little bit. There's a little bit of AP sometimes, analysis paralysis, as people are trying to figure out what to do. Should I move my glazier back? Should I put it on this? Should I finish my paint now, or should I save those colors for when it's the bonus round? So that tends to sometimes disrupt the flow. That being said, it moves pretty well. And I think the gameplay itself, it says 30 to 45 minutes like the first one. I find this one takes a little bit longer. I've seen games go about an hour, depending on how many people you have around the table. Certainly, if you got people familiar with the game, you can rip through it in 30 to 45 minutes. So it's not a long game by any stretch. It's a decent amount of flow, but there's a few hiccups as you get used to the moving parts and the pieces during the course of the game. So I'll give the gameplay and the game flow a B-. Again, related to ease of play. It all depends on your personal preference. I mean, the first of the 3 is the simplest to learn, simplest to play. Again, it's sort of the purest. This one is the most in-depth of the 3. That being said, it's not a difficult game to learn. It's 8+ on the box. My kids are 10 and 13. They've handled this for years. Again, so all 3 of these games, and we'll see the last one, the third and final one next week, they're not difficult. They're easy enough to teach and to play. Of the 3, though, this is the one that is the most involved. So I'll give the ease of play a B. Because it's the most involved, there are some more tactical things going on. So as we talk about the tactics and the strategy, There's a significant amount of tactics and strategy in all three of these games. This one in particular, there's a lot to think about. When do I want to move my glazier back? When do I want to pass, or do I want to finish those panes now to score the points, or do I want to hold off until I can get a few extra bonus points for that color corresponding in the bonus round? Again, like the other two games in this series, keeping one eye on what you're doing, but keeping a close eye on those around the table, particularly the player going before and the player going after you, not wanting to set them up. So there is quite a bit of tactics and strategy in this one. And on the one hand, it's a little more strategic, maybe even than the first one, because there's a few more moving parts in the game. And, this is the most punishing of the three Azul games as well. We saw in the first one, you can lose a few points each round. This one, you could be losing up to 18 points by the end of the game, depending on how many times you take starting player, or how many times you're forced to get rid of tiles that you can't place on your board. And so there's some tactics and strategy, and there's a little bit of take that. You can try and play defensive and cut off the other players. So depending on how punishing you like a game to be, that might be a positive or a negative. There is some player interaction, not directly. You're not taking things off other players' boards, but you're certainly affecting what they can and can't do. So there is a significant amount of tactics and strategy in the game, and I'll give it an A-. So all in all, last week I gave the original Azul a B+. I like the original one just slightly, marginally more than this second one. However, they're both in my collection. They both hit the table frequently. At the end of the day, if you're looking for a good abstract strategy game for the family that has enough depth to keep you thinking and interacting around the table, perhaps this second Azul game, Stained Glass of Sintra, is for you as well. I'll give it a B overall. Well, that's a wrap today on Tripp Advisor. Thanks for joining me once again for another Tabletop Tuesday board game tutorial and review. That's 2 of the 3 Azul games wrapped up. And come back next week as I'll finish this sort of 3-week little mini-series as we look at the 3rd and final Azul game, Azul Summer Pavilion. Between now and then, you can check out my channel for some of my other videos. On Thursdays, I do Theology Thursday videos and conversations occasionally. And on Fridays, I do Film Friday movie reviews and conversations. So you're welcome to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Click the like button, share it widely. And hey, whatever you're pulling out around your table today or in this week, I hope you enjoy your time gaming. Game on.